I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Well, it's Friday, and Friday we do the Healing Circle. I'm glad to be in the company of my colleagues and my leaders, I call them, Dr. Oliver Williams and Dr. Bravada Garrett Akansanya. The Healing Circle, a partnership with the African American Child Wellness Institute. Our mission is to talk about health and wellness in our community, about healing, about the experience of being healed, but also the work of being healers in community, healers in society, healers in the world. What a wonderful mission, what a wonderful vision, and what a wonderful team to be associated with. And we are so pleased to have this platform to connect with you. We invite you to participate, to share your ideas, your thoughts, your feelings, your concerns, your knowledge through these platforms. And a couple of ways you can do that. One is simply to leave a comment. We're streaming on several platforms. We're streaming on YouTube for the Black Press of America, on YouTube for Insight News MN. Those are our two channels. We're also streaming on 3 Facebook platforms, on LinkedIn, and on Twitter. So no matter how you're connecting, we value the connection. We thank you for being connected, and we invite you to help us grow connections with other people in the community, in the country, around the world. Our mission is to provide what we call a robust conversation, an engaging conversation that lightens the pathway to self-realization and to effective being in community for all of us everywhere. Well, we begin our Fridays program with a special process, a protocol, and I invite Dr. B to come forward and sort of explain and guide us in that. And with that, will lead to a wonderful program talking with people who are community organizers, people builders, people connectors. We're talking about a project called Alice. We'll explain what that means momentarily. And then secondly, in the course of this hour, we're expecting a visit from our former mayor, Sharon Sayles Belton. And we've got a gazillion things to talk to her about, but we're inviting her to show up in part as an advocate, a surrogate for the Harris Walz campaign. So look for that over the course of the next hour. But let us begin, and we begin by saying hello to Dr. B, Dr. Bravada Garrett Akansanya, my queen, my sister. How you doing? Welcome.
Thank you, my king, my brother. Happy Friday to you and our listening audience and family. I'm so delighted to once again invite people to just join us in the circle, in this virtual space. And I ask people once again to just be centered and stop for a moment and just take in a breath and let it out through your mouth. Just let it go. And look to your left. Look to your right. Check behind you. Notice you're in a safe space. And as you sit there in the chair, allow yourself to connect to the healing space, to be here as a healer and as one who is healed and as one who is healing. So we join in a circle is our protocol because African people meet in circle. And the circle is a sacred space because there is no beginning, no end, no top, no bottom, and everyone in the circle has equal access to the center, which is the space of voice and power. In our circle, we honor our elders because those are the shoulders we stand on. And we acknowledge what they have done to get us where we are. Each of us sit here as embodiments of centuries of dreams. And we also honor our ancestors, for those were the shoulders our elders stood on. And we honor our ancestors because they're closest to our Creator. And knowing that the African way is that all things are connected. All things. We're connected to each other, the earth, the sky, and through that connection, we hold the power of our sacredness. In this circle, we have order, as is African way. So we use a talking stick that we pass for one another in the circle. And if you feel like you need the talking stick, you just ask for it. And because we're virtual, of course, we're using a virtual talking stick. So as we use this talking stick today, we invite you to save voice, share voice, and be in a space of healing with us. And we say, welcome to the circle. So I pass the talking stick to Baba Al.
Well, thank you. Let's bring in Dr. Oliver Williams. Dr. Williams, brother, good to see you as always. How you doing?
Good to see you too. Hey, Bravada.
Hey, brother.
I'm doing okay. So I'm hanging in. It's good to be with you all today.
Well, over the course of this hour, I want to make sure that all of us get a chance to weigh in on the what I believe is the top story of the day, and that is the emergence of Kamala Harris as the Democratic, now we think, leading candidate for the president of the United States, the election mere days away, several weeks away. And I want us to talk about that over the course of the conversation. We'll engage all of our guests around that theme as well. But two more things. Once, Dr. B, as you were speaking, I just was thinking about what I'm reading now. I'm rereading a book. I simply want to share it and ask people to check it out because you mentioned African philosophy. And this book is called, African Philosophy, the Pharaonic Period, written by Theophile Obenga. It's a great book, and it talks about the question and the origin of philosophical thought in African people. And along with that, I'm reading a piece that also just my third reading of it, but it keeps me going. And it's a piece by a brother named Ikwe Arma. He's author of 7 novels, translates several scholarly works, including Obenga's African Philosophy, the Pharaonic Period. So he translated that into English for him. And it's a great book. So put those things out there for thought. Check them out. I'm excited. Hopefully you'll be as well. Listen, let me bring in my first two guests, and they are Stephanie Lewis and Dr. Aaron. Guys, welcome to the conversation. Let me introduce you and pass the talking stick to you. And you can just lay out the ideas, the concerns that you're bringing for the conversation today. Stephanie has leveraged nearly 2 decades of strategy development and implementation, policy education, and operations, creating a reputation for building and positioning organizations for success. And so she works with teams to align time, talent, treasure, and to drive impact in organizations and communities. She's currently Associate Vice President for Advocacy and Community Impact at Greater Twin Cities United Way, where she leads both advocacy and community engagement, as well as strategy execution for Beyond the Dollar initiatives. We'll talk about that. She draws her expertise from roles in public, private, nonprofit sectors, and she adds value to conversations around trust-based philanthropy, around community engagement and activation, around systems disruption and organized effectiveness. She's a committed person to the idea of cultivating equity-centered, balanced, trust-based relationships between community and power structures. What's the mission? The mission is to advance systems change. And she's going to talk about, Alice, before I let you give the stick to you, I want to introduce Dr. Aaron as well. And then I'll pass the talking stick to you, Stephanie. And if you would, you can pass it to Dr. Aaron. And as Dr. B said, at any time somebody is moved by the Spirit, you jump in and grab the stick and say what you got to say as the Spirit moves you. Dr. Aaron Flicker is a PhD, MSW, LISC social worker, licensed social worker who's dedicated the last decade to leading research and evaluation teams that are focused on program implementation and outcomes, on policy evaluation, and on infrastructure development for evidence-based delivery models. And so prior to her research career, she worked as a behavioral health clinician across the continuum of care. Her doctorate in organizational leadership, policy and development specializes in evaluation, health equity, and implementation science. And she's particularly energized by engaging with complex problems and driving intentional, sustainable equity-centered system change. System change is the operation here. I mentioned the word Alice. I'm going to go first to handing the talking stick to Stephanie Lewis. What is Alice? And Stephanie, welcome to the conversation. Welcome to the Healing Circle. And Stephanie, you're muted somehow.
I am muted. You would think I would know it by now. Well, thank you so much, Al and Dr. B and Dr. Williams for having me and my colleague, Dr. Flicker, here today to talk more about Alice. I am actually going to hand off the talking stick to Dr. Flicker because she was leading the steering committee as well as the research advisory committee. And then we'll just go ahead and we'll go back and forth in our conversation.
Well, before you do that, let me ask you to take a second to talk about your work then broadly at Twin Cities United Way. And let me also, in the spirit of transparency, let our viewers and listeners know that you and I are connected because I serve as the chairman of the board of directors of Greater Twin Cities United Way. So I have a vested interest in ensuring that people know and engage, embrace, and support the work, vision, and mission of Greater Twin Cities United Way. And I want people to know that. Stephanie, talk about you first for a minute, and then we'll pass the talking stick over to Dr. Flicker.
Well, yeah, I mean, my bio covers most of it, but the reason why I'm here at this work is that Greater Twin Cities United Way, it deeply connects to my why, and part of that why is that my family is a part of that Alice, the Alice population that Aaron and I will speak a little bit more on. But my work here at United Way, the advocacy role is a new part of my responsibilities and accountabilities. And I'm excited to have that. I have a background in public policy. I have a master's in public policy. And my role here at United Way is really to go deeper into our advocacy work and really advance that as, I see advocacy as a tool for systems change. And one of the things that I am most passionate about within advocacy at United Way is really to get it to align it to the rest of our work, the rest of our systems change work. And that means really looking at how advocacy shifts over time. And we know it's incremental. And so really moving the organization from a year to year viewing of advocacy or just legislative year to seeing that this is 24/7, 365, and it is very incremental. And so really excited about some of the things that we are working on, the initiatives. I just hired somebody, really excited to bring on that new person to get them started and engaged in the work. And we really see that Alice, this data set about lived experiences, will definitely support future policy conversations about how to really create communities where everyone thrives. With that, I will pass the talking stick over to my colleague Aaron to talk about Alice.
Thank you, Stephanie. And thank you, everyone. I'm really, really excited to be here today. I just want to do a quick elevation of Stephanie's work because the way she talks about it so casually, she's like, oh, yes, I'm doing systems change. But Stephanie has been literally instrumental in so much of the work that Greater Twin Cities United Way does. She oversees all of the operations team for all of the grant making work we do, in addition to the advocacy work. And what I really appreciate and what I think ties to what we're talking about today is that Stephanie has brought this lens of looking at like shifting of power as wins in policy work. And I think that that's just really, really been advantageous on so many levels when we're engaging in the platforms that we engage with. So I'm really glad to be here with Stephanie today to talk about Alice. And I think for myself, I've been with United Way for a couple of years now. I oversee the impact evaluation work, and Alice as it's come to the state. And what Alice is essentially is a new way of understanding financial hardship that folks are experiencing across the state. And what I think that this offers us is yet another tool of understanding the impact of structural racism in our programs and looking towards community-led solutions for that. Alice started as a small research project for one county in northern New Jersey. It stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. And what the folks in that county were realizing, they were seeing that they were being flagged as one of the wealthier counties in their state, and they were still seeing a really high need or high request for services and supports. And they were really puzzled because they're like, we don't understand. Our poverty levels are relatively low. What's happening here? And I think that since Alice has started, there's become more of a mainstream conversation about the way in which the federal poverty guidelines are inadequate in understanding the experiences of people across community. And that conversation is happening in spaces and places that it hasn't necessarily happened historically. But 15 years later, Alice, this asset limited, income constrained, employed data set is now a national project. And really it's a movement towards making meaningful community driven systems change. Ultimately, and I think that, I'm sure you all have some understanding of it, but our poverty rate that we tend to use in conversation right now, it's based on the federal poverty guidelines, right? They were developed in the 60s. They were based on like minimum dietary requirements at the time. And what we know is that as these have been updated, they've been relatively static. As they've been updated, they just haven't kept pace with costs of housing, transportation, healthcare, childcare, all of those other pieces that are elements of our basic needs that we have across our state. So Alice has become that vehicle to paint a more clear picture of struggling households. Our inaugural report was launched this Tuesday, September 10th at the Rotunda at the state capitol here in Minnesota. And we're really excited because these data are publicly available. Any and everyone can use them, but since we've been able to have this deeper analysis of American Community Survey data and other indicators that we use from DEED, from HUD, from different across the state, we've been able to create essentially a survival budget, which is the minimum necessary to live in our current economy. But this survival budget is responsive to places. So we know that the cost of living in rural Minnesota may not be the same as the cost of living in the metro. So we've been really able to dig down to really a zip code level, understanding what these costs are that families are experiencing to be able to afford the bare minimum, the housing, childcare, food, transportation, healthcare, basic technology, and then taxes on top of that. And these data show some really interesting things. So overall across the state, the average survival budget is about $77,000 a year for a family of four. This compares to like a single adult, you'll see like $26,000. But what we know about the federal poverty guideline is even at 200% of the federal poverty guideline, this number well exceeds it. The part that's an added layer is that the range of this budget is very, very broad across the state. So we see as low as $69,000 a year in Wilkin County, but as high as over $103,000 for that same family of four in Washington County. Mm-hmm. And so when we use a static number for eligibility for assistance programs or for understanding the experiences, that experience will vary so deeply depending on where you are in our state that it just won't accurately capture what's happening. And so when we pair this survival budget that we've created using Minnesota specific indicators with what's reported in the American Community Survey, the census data, we can see in 2022, overall across the state, 36% of households are not reaching the threshold of what is necessary to make ends meet. And this varies significantly by demographics, as we would expect and know. And so what it ultimately breaks down to is we see actually about 60% of households, 60% of Black households and Native American households are below this ALICE threshold. 45% of Hispanic households, again, using census terminology. And so that's how they understand identity. So 45% of Hispanic households are below this ALICE threshold. And so we see significant disparities show, or significant differences, right, in ability to navigate these systems show up in those numbers. We also see differences by family composition. So if you are a single female-headed household, you are 72% of single female-headed households are below this ALICE threshold, compared to 12% that are below that threshold for married households with children. And so this report, this is a very, very high level understanding that I'm sharing with you. But if you go to our website, there's interactive dashboards. You can literally manipulate and understand this data to understand your specific community and work with these data to substantiate and collaborate to unify the stories that we're hearing, right? And to really elevate this experience into the spaces and places that it makes sense to elevate them. So I want to pause. I can keep going, but I want to pause and see if anybody wants the talking stick for a moment to ask any questions really quickly.
Well, Stephanie, why don't you come back in?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Why don't you continue with that? Why don't you give us more information and more insight?
So I mean, Aaron really shared a lot about gave a high level overview of the data, but now we're going to talk about what does this mean? We know that this data exists. We know that this is robust and we're all excited about it, but what does it mean for the deeper work, like how we do our everyday work? And some of the things that I want to just lift up and just this, I believe that there's a ton of possibility with this data. A couple of things just immediately is one, how this data set in and of itself is really raising awareness. I'm sorry, the wind. This data set is raising awareness across the United Way network, but then also in the states that they are located in about this largely overlooked population. And honestly, it's only overlooked until people only pay attention to this population every 4 years, right? During election. And I know you're going to be talking to Mayor Sayles Belton, but that's when we talk about the struggling middle class. And we also understand that the middle class is getting bigger and bigger. And so we're just really figuring out what is the middle class? So that is a whole nother conversation, but it's a raising awareness about a largely overlooked population. And really it helps us to better understand our communities, better understand our neighbors, better understand the people that are colleagues, right? We may have colleagues that may be in the ALICE, in the ALICE population. I know I have family members that still call, 211 resource hotline for help when they are struggling to put food on the table, or they need to find affordable childcare, or they need to access, childcare scholarships. Where do they start? So this information has a lot of value in those spaces. It really helps us in terms of policy, because we know that, Aaron has mentioned the federal poverty guidelines. And when we're proposing legislation, when we're reading about proposed legislation, about additional investments in these programs, they are anchored in this pretty much archaic federal poverty guideline. And what this does, this expands the conversation and really asks who really does need our help. Right. It's not just the worst of the worst. It's pretty much everybody. 40%, I think Aaron mentioned it, 40% of the state of Minnesota is below the ALICE threshold. That means literally 1.5 of us on this call is struggling to make ends meet. And so we need policy that really reflects the everyday experiences of the people, of our neighbors, of the people in our family, of our colleagues. And so that's what we can use this data for, is to have those deeper level conversations and really begin to identify what really are the problems. I'm taking a note from Dr. Myers. What are the problems we're really trying to solve, and develop policy solutions that really meet those problems, address those problems.
Let me add a stick right quick. I'm just excited. So thank you so much, sister, for sharing about poverty. and what it looks like. I understand. I always have this, remember this joke on Eddie Murphy Trading Places, and the man says, "I'm sure you're from a broken home." He said, "Yeah, we were broke. So what?" So a lot of us grew up in less than, I think, adequate housing, food. A lot of us grew up in that. And I think about it when I think about, since it's hurricane season, I think about it when I think about New Orleans. And everybody was telling everybody to get out of town. And they kept asking, why are all these Black folks still here? They're not heeding the warning. They never thought for a minute that all of them, those people that they were referring to, they take public transportation. And then at the end of the hurricane, they showed all these school buses flooded, all the city buses flooded that could have taken people out of the city. So I understand how we forget what poverty looks like. And that mayor was a Black man. So it's not necessarily a racial issue. It's a cultural understanding of where you are. Even this week, like yesterday or today, I talked to one of my clinicians about sending one of our trainees out to a far place in the other side of St. Paul, only to find out she doesn't even have a car. So the key is what you're doing, what you're describing needs to be elevated in our discourse. It needs to be among the first things we think about. And me as a healer in my counseling center, that helps me understand how come so many people with what I would say good jobs can't afford to bring their children to therapy. This helps me understand this better. And it needs to be, I'm just giving you an amen on it, and you got to convert. And I'm just saying we need to figure out how we can elevate that, not just in this conversation, but for the rest of the year in our healing circle. And we talk about access to whatever it is. We need to elevate that truly critical information that you just shared. So I'm saying thank you for bringing it to the healing circle. And I know we're about to get somewhere going. So here's a stick back. Whoever want it, I can give it back to you, Sister Stephanie, since you had it last, but I had to grab that stick.
Thank you so much, Dr. V. I really appreciate your sentiments and your support for the work. I just want to say, in talking about like thinking more concretely around policy, Michigan has leveraged this to do some really cool things around raising or tripling the earned income tax credit, really lifting like 22,000 Michiganders out of poverty. But let me take a step back. One of the things that, we can definitely do some of those things here in the state of Minnesota, but some of those things are already done, but we could do more. So for example, last year, they passed a universal lunch program. And that addressed, without people knowing, that addressed that Alice population. Again, I was a part of, and I literally cried when they passed it, because I remember having that experience. My parents were both working full time, some of them pulling, doubles and triples, and still couldn't give me $2 a week, me and my brothers and sisters, $2 a week to afford lunch. So there were times where I had to get the bag lunch with the peanut butter, not jelly, jelly's fancy, peanut butter sandwich with milk and an apple. And I remember the feeling sitting at that table while everyone was eating a regular lunch, and I was pointed out as having, everybody knew I couldn't afford it. So that is some more of the policy prescriptions that we can advance once we have access, once we can actually get this data set into the hands of our legislators, into the hands of our coalitions, into the hands of organizations like Greater Twin Cities United Way, who cares about the everyday experiences of people.
Thank you.
Dr. Oliver, why don't you take the talking stick? Any thoughts or feelings?
Yeah, I guess when I was a kid, my mother was a person that was working in the house. My father had passed away. So I'm one of those kids too that experienced like Stephanie did. Jelly was fancy, huh? And was able to sort of leverage that. It was interesting to me. I heard something within the last couple of weeks, and talking about standing on the shoulders of our ancestors. and I'm getting this thing on Facebook that talked about inventors and people that contributed to our community that we didn't know about. And thinking about people who believed in us until we were able and ready to believe in ourselves. And I continue to think about people that contributed to our well-being as a community, and I guess I'm moved by it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Moved by people who did well by us. And so I think that as we continue to support the work, I think about the work that Sam Myers has done and things that Sharon did as the mayor of Minnesota, and that she continues to do, and Michael, her husband, to do well for people who contribute to the well-being of the community. I just continue to think about people who do well by us, even though we may not know the work that they continue to do for us. And I know that Sharon went to South Africa, as Sam did, and Gary went, and also the person who's the current director of the School of Social Work, Joan Blakey. We're all in South Africa. I did get Joan connected to one of my colleagues that's in Cape Town, although all of them didn't get a chance to make the connection. They did, and they had a useful conversation with one another. But the question that I think about is how do you make the research that you all are doing accessible to more members of the community, so they understand the numbers and what it says, and how the information that you're pulling together has usefulness, to know that one person in one community with the same amount of money may not do as well as other people in other parts of the community with access to those resources, may not do as well or may be doing better. And how do you make that useful and that information useful to people who are in other parts of the city or different counties? How do you communicate that to them and let them understand what you need, basically, to be able to survive? It may be different. And how do you end up educating people about what that means and how they can utilize that information to do better? And what does better mean? In different places that you're located in. So that's something that I think is important. But the other question that I have is, how do people hold on to that spirit that helps you understand what it means to do better? That I've been thinking about Maya Angelou, and the comments that she's had been making. She says, "Well, how do you do better?" She says, "Well, you do what you can for as you're doing your work and living your life, until you know how to do better. And then when you learn how to do better, then you apply that, then you start doing better." So you do better until you know how to do better. And then when you do learn what those things are, then you do that. So those are the things that I was thinking about as you were uh, all talking and sharing your insights about this work.
Well, let me expand the conversation. Thanks, Dr. Oliver. One of the things that I thought about as you guys were presenting, Dr. Flicker and Stephanie, was the marvelous work of UROC in North Minneapolis. And why it was important was that there was a crisis in community where researchers wanted to do studies on Black children, Black youth, work that needed to be done, but the way the work was introduced, the community ran headlong into resistance of people who were saying, we're sick and tired of being researched and having the product of that research sit on the shelf somewhere. Somebody else gets the money, we get the misery. We get the misery, they get the money. Our misery ends up being somebody else's business, their livelihood and their future and their fortune and their fame. And our community said, we object. The consequence of that was the emergence of the continued development of the UROC proposition, the university's Urban Research Outreach and Engagement Center. And one of the things that struck me in my meeting with Dr. Irma McLaurin, the originating director of UROC, was a clear picture on the need to understand, to know, to use, to engage, and to navigate the future with data-driven decision making. And here we go with Erin, a way to, as Dr. Oliver just mentioned, broadly present the data, broadly present access, broadly present awareness, and enable neighborhoods, families, communities, individuals, institutions to compile and reconfigure the data, to research the data to give us better decisions. Well, with that, Erin, if you and Stephanie allow me, I want to bring in, I will say Dr. Mayor, former Mayor Sharon Sayles Belton, and she's been a player in moving our community forward, not only locally, but nationally. Sharon Sayles Belton, good afternoon. Welcome to the conversation and to the Healing Circle. And I said before you came, you were going to be joining us as a surrogate talking about the powerful and historic Harris Walz campaign. So with that, let me hand the talking stick to you, inviting you to talk about that and more, in as much as we're following the maximum Dr. B opened with, and that is that we understand that everything is connected. All of us are connected. All of the ideas, all the interests, all the solutions are connected. And you, Mayor Sharon Sayles Belton, are a solution maker. Good afternoon. Welcome, sister.
Good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here with you and all of these esteemed guests. I've enjoyed listening to this conversation and really appreciate the opportunity to lend my voice to it and maybe explore with all of you how we can answer the question that we just heard Dr. Oliver speak to, and that is getting information, to our community and to our community leaders so that they can apply that information and improve the quality of life of people in our community and as well in other communities across the country. This is not a new problem, and it is not a problem unique to Minneapolis. And we've got to find better ways of bringing the power of academia to city leaders and community leaders across the board. I want to just tell one quick story, if I could, before
Please.
I launch into the case, for the Harris Walz ticket. And I just I want people to just remember the year 1995 in the city of Minneapolis. That was the year that there were a record number of homicides in a very short period of time. What we learned about that circumstance is that a lot of the individuals who were involved in those crimes were young people between the ages of 13 and 25. And we asked the question of ourselves, what's going on here? what is the reason that we find so many of our young people and many of them youth involved in violent crime? Well, we didn't have all the answers to those questions, but I'll tell you what we did. We looked to the people who we thought could bring us that information and could give us some answers and who could help us devise some strategies. One of the places we went to was an organization called the Search Institute. And I'm sure many of you remember the Search Institute. It was run by Dr. Peter Benson for a number of years. So we went to the Search Institute and we asked them questions about youth development and leadership and conflict, etc. But we also went over to the University of Minnesota's Child and Youth Development Center and the professionals there. And we asked them to take a look at the information that we knew about these crimes, some of the other circumstances that may be contributing to the crimes in those areas where the violence was taking place, and to help us better understand what was going on and what might be a practical solution. Because everybody believed that the solution was, let's just hire some more police. Police aren't the solution because they're not the ones who are committing, in this instance, the crimes. It was young people. What are the motivations of young people? How does youth, brain development work? I mean, we asked a number of critical questions. And then we actually hired an epidemiologist to help us, pull all of that information together and give us an important, in-depth narrative for what the problem really was and what the possible solutions were. Guess what? Armed with the right information, armed with information and data that was appropriately analyzed, we were able to come back and create a series of recommendations that we could in fact present to the community to say, if we apply these tactics, if we apply these strategies, if we are all collectively involved in this work, we can bring this juvenile violent crime statistic down. Well, you know what? Because we took the time to really get the right information properly analyzed, because we were willing to go back out to the community and explain to them what this data meant and how it contributed to the formation of the recommendations, we got everybody to buy in, get on board, collaborate, and we were able to, in fact, and the data shows this, so I'm not just patting myself on the back or anything like that, we were able to drive that youth violent crime statistic down in less than a year because we did the right thing. And one of the right things means bringing everybody to the table and letting everybody contribute to contributing to being a part of the solution to the problem. So, you know what? My view is that there are some formulas for how the academic community and our grassroots community, our activists, our advocates can all work collaboratively together to resolve the problems that we're experiencing even today in our community. We need to take the time to do that. We need to ensure that all the partners are at the table. So I'm going to continually advocate for answering the question that Dr. Oliver put so eloquently on the table. How do we take the knowledge and expertise that we have and bring it to the community and actually solve our problems? How long in Minnesota do we want to live with the disparities that we have been talking about for the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years? How long?
Real good.
Great question. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Sharon Sayles Belton. Let me ask you to go straight into your work now as a surrogate for the campaign and talk about the importance of the campaign, how that ties into what you just said.
One of the things that I think about always when I think about this particular campaign, I think about the issues of leadership. And I think about the questions that we as a society here in the United States always ask ourselves about leadership. And that question usually centers around, who can, who should lead? Now, having been, the first woman and the first African American elected mayor of the city of Minneapolis, I will tell you that there were a number of people who questioned whether or not I could lead a major U.S. city, lead the city that I grew up in. And for many, the question centered around two issues. She's Black. Can she lead effectively? She's a woman. Can she lead effectively? Is she tough enough? Shouldn't she be home with her kids? Now, isn't there some more reasonable work that she can do? All of these things to my face in our community. Now, on the surface, all of you would think those are pretty ridiculous questions. But the truth of the matter is that there are people who still ask that question today. And they're asking it now in the context of the Vice President of the United States as a candidate for the presidency. And I say the question has been answered over and over and over and over again. Yes, women are competent to lead this country. We are competent to lead in every opportunity where we have the chance. And the question is, in this case, it's up to the American voter. And so, what's the challenge for the campaign? What's the challenge for Vice President Kamala Harris? Her challenge is straightforward. Sharing the information that she has about her experience in the role of vice president and in all of the key and extraordinary positions of leadership that she has had throughout her entire career. She has had to make the tough decisions when she was the city attorney. She had to make the tough decisions when she was, the attorney general. She's had to make the tough decisions when she was a senator. She's had to make tough decisions, informed decisions when she was, or as she served as the vice president of the United States. So the question is whether or not we believe that she's ready. Now, I, for one, say I'm already on board, and I know she is. I know she is. I know she is because I have looked at her record. I have listened to her articulate her experience and as well apply that experience to how she would take on the responsibilities for being responsible for the greatest nation, at least in my opinion, in on this planet. Can she stand up to bullies? Well, one would say that she had the opportunity to do that just a few nights ago,
That's
and I
right.
think she did very well. But that's not really what it's just all about, right? This is not about just, in my opinion, about beating Donald Trump, who is her challenger or who she's challenging. I think this is really about the confidence that we have as the American people that this individual can do the job without regard to her race, without regard to her gender. There have been countless examples that we as women have had to face when we were, again, trying to demonstrate our competency. Just think back about that, if you would, for just one moment. There was a time when we didn't believe that women could be firefighters. In fact, we called the position firemen. There was a time when they didn't see women as being leaders in law enforcement. And in fact, back then they called the job policeman. We don't use those archaic terms anymore because we have demonstrated over the years, that we can do any job that we are trained and qualified to do. So I think this notion about gender and about race have played themselves out. And again, trust me, I know and understand and believe that there are people who don't really accept that notion, and they're stuck, in the past. But our job and our responsibility is to let people, know that it's time for us to move forward, and that we're not going back, to, the old narratives. We are not giving up on any of the successes that we have achieved as women, or even, more broadly, as a country.
Mhm.
And those are the messages that I want to articulate each and every day as people ask the question about who they're going to vote for.
Mhm.
Most of my friendship circle
We lost a little
doesn't.
bit. There we go.
Most of the people in my circle don't raise the question anymore about whether or not the country is ready to elect a woman, because we believe that has been proven um, countless times. Women have been appointed to head some of the most influential divisions in our government. And we can point to women on both sides of the political party. Condoleezza
Mhm.
Rice, for
Mhm.
example. Give me
Mhm.
a break. She was the leading um, person in the world with regard to national and global security. So we've demonstrated this over and over again. So I believe I think the jury is out, and the jury's come back and said, yes, we're ready to turn the corner. We're ready to give the most qualified person the opportunity to lead the United States, of America. And again, that person is Kamala Harris. Now,
Mayor,
I'm absolutely delighted. Let me just get this one
go
out.
ahead.
I'm absolutely delighted that when she was vetting, candidates to be her running mate, she looked to Minnesota. She looked to Minnesota and found an individual in Governor Tim Walz, who represents, all that is good about America, and certainly
Mhm,
all that is good about Minnesota.
mhm.
I will tell you, my phone was ringing off the hook when she announced that him as her choice. And the people who were calling me were calling me from, again, Washington, D.C., New York City, California, Montana, Wyoming, for that matter. It was
Mhm.
just incredible. And the reason why they were excited is because they knew Tim Walz's record, and they really believed that he represented, the heartland of America. And that's what we need. We need to bring the heartland of America back into the White House so that we can lead the nation forward. We need to put the divisiveness that unfortunately has dominated the debate between Republicans and Democrats behind us and move forward as one. So I just wanted to get that out as my opening statement, Al, and
Mhm.
look forward to, you know, rigorous discussion.
Well, we'll probably do that in succeeding weeks because we're getting out of time already, but what a wonderful beginning. But I want to throw out one question and ask everybody to grab it. And I'm going to invite everybody back because I think this is a conversation that has to go on and on and on. In fact, that's the premise, Dr. Oliver. How do we communicate this broadly, consistently, all the time, everywhere, so that ordinary people uh, uh,
That's right.
master the vocabulary that allows us to articulate our victory, our future, our success, and our will in creating and being co-creators of the future. The question is transformation. And would all of you think about this? Joe Biden, when he began, said he was going to be a transformative president.
Right.
I think I know what he means right now, because in selecting Kamala Harris, he's really brought the epitome of that idea forward and placed it in motion. And guess what? Uh, Tim Walz, exactly the same thing. The power that he has as an effective and leading governor, but making the decision to join that ticket also creates a daisy chain effect with the potential of a Native American indigenous woman becoming the first governor of Minnesota, and the potential of Bobby Joe Champion, who's president of the Senate, becoming the first African American lieutenant governor. A chain of events, all of it around the question of transformation. Dr. Aaron, Dr. B, Stephanie, Dr. Williams, and Mayor Belton, Sharon Sayles Belton, is transformation what we're talking about right now? Is transformation at hand? Let me go to Aaron first, and then Stephanie, and be brief because we've got about 5 minutes altogether.
Yes, absolutely. I see that we're right on the cusp of a space and time where I can see some pretty incredible things happening for our country. And I want to make sure that everybody has a chance to speak. So I don't want to take too much time, but I think that that is a really great way of understanding the way in which transformation can happen.
And how does a tool like Alice fit into that?
So Alice, I feel, just to think of Dr. Oliver's question earlier, Alice is a conversation. It's a data set, yes, but it's the conversation. And I think that what we've been talking about as we're talking about this transformation is stories, conversation, and community based. And so I think that Alice is going to be a part of this conversation and is going to be an inherent part of that transformation that's happening.
Stephanie, would you take the talking stick?
All right. And you're talking about, what's the question again? So I want to make sure I want to.
Well, what's on your heart? No, what's on your heart? You can speak to what this moment is speaking to you.
Well, I think this moment, I think we are all recognizing that there's a collective fatigue with the status quo. We are tired of seeing our neighbors, our friends, our family members going without, and they're working hard and they're doing all the things, they're doing all the right things, and they're still not getting the promise of the American dream, right? And I think there's a collective fatigue in that. And I think we do want to go forward. We're at this point where we're willing to try new and different things in order to get there. And I think there's a will where there wasn't 40 years ago, there wasn't 20 years ago, hell, there wasn't 10 years ago. And so I think tools like Alice and, getting out the vote and all, with advocacy, systems change driven advocacy, I think we'll get there. I think we'll get to, we'll start to enter where we can begin to see transformation, not just, discrete wins, but wins that lead to, transformative systems change. So I'm really excited about this moment. I think, we are at a point where we can do some meaningful things here. And I'm really excited.
Dr. Oliver, I'm passing talking stick to you. 30 seconds, maybe a minute, thoughts, impressions.
Well, the thing that I think about is the fact that you have evidence that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have been useful in trying to get community to do better and have evidence of that. You don't have that with Trump. What you have with him is a person that wants to look backwards to, and I also think about rigging. He has rigged the system to work better for his group of people who haven't done well by, most people. But you have Kamala Harris and Tim Walz that have evidence of trying to do better, for more people, and have Sharon Belton, who has evidence of doing well by the groups that she has led, and evidence, in terms of her work. So, and I also was pleased that the debate that Kamala Harris showed that she was very capable of handling a person who's been a bully. So, so I'll keep it there and let you.
Let me ask Sharon Sayles Belton to take 30 seconds with the instruction, and then we're going to close with Dr. B. Mayor
So
Belton.
the one thing that I would just say is that electing Kamala Harris, President of the United States, and Tim Walz as our Vice President would be a very great thing. But I will also tell you that we need to be paying our attention to who's also in the House of Representatives and the United States Senate. We saw under President Obama how a Republican Senate really tried to thwart his entire agenda. So again, in order to get things done, you have to have collaboration on multiple levels. And so let's pay attention to the big picture as we come into this next season of politics in America.
And Dr. B, you're going to close us out.
Okay, I'm glad to do that. We come back full circle, realizing that we stand here the embodiment of centuries of dreams. We hold the power of generations of people who could not vote. We hold the power of generations of people who have died so that we just pick up that pen and write who we want and use our minds, our bodies, and our spirit to overcome any oppression. Ain't nobody gonna stop us. Ain't nobody gonna turn us around but us. And we must remember, it's not all about us. The time is now. And that's a divine appointment. And with that, I drop the mic.
There we go. Well, the mic has been dropped. Thank you all for being here. Sharon, you have to come back and talk about South Africa. And a bunch of more. I mean, I think we need to have this conversation about South Africa and about the election a bunch of more times between now and the election.
Yes.
Can I call you back again?
Absolutely, Al. Good to talk to you today.
All right. Take care. I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.